maybe I just overloaded my computer. I was trying to play a song at 12:57, and the song I'll probably wait and do it next time we're together. But now that we're here and I've apologized for being late, what would you like to talk about?
Well, something amazing that I think your sister and Nicholas Soames were working together in the 1994-1997 period, and I think we can prove it, and we can prove what they were doing that is germane to the 911 attack. Over to you.
Okay, and I have some exciting news. At least I think it's exciting. You know this extortion 17 SEAL whose parents were in this shop and in my home for a total of 5 hours 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, Aaron Vaughan, right?
Yeah, Aaron Vaughn is the SEAL who was murdered. This is my choice of words. I would say he was murdered with discretion of forethought by elements of the Obama administration who feared greatly that he and the 14 other SEALs on Extortion 17 were going to come back to the States and explain that nobody got Osama bin Laden. Uh, the, the lies in this administration are just amazing. And on that note, uh, Freeport Girl and myself are working diligently to make sure this plunge is a pleasant plunge. We're getting a fair number of new people from all over, including two ladies from Florida, a lady from Los Angeles. I'm sure some other people I can't think of right now. And we're making all sorts of things. We're making tie-dye boys and another. Currently, right now, there's more females coming than males, which is good. It indicates that they apparently are communicating amongst each other and they know that this is one of the safest places to ever be, meaning the Pierce County, Wisconsin area. Uh, the details that Pat and I have been working on include lodging and speaking engagements for Karen and Billy Vaughn, the parents of Aaron Vaughn. And in what I consider exciting news is the fact that not only will the parents of Aaron Vaughn be here to celebrate America with us and aboard Extortion 17, but I've ordered some license plates to honor the SEAL and the SEALs. And those plates will be put on the 36 Studebaker immediately before we drive in the parade on Friday night, the 18th, after having our victory dinner over Obama, Holder, Marcy, and the rest of the cutthroats on July 17th. So why don't you fill us in on what my sister and one of the Soameses, I don't know if it's Soupy or Soapy, but their mother just died last weekend, probably of embarrassment at the two biggest boobs in England, leaving, of course, Cameron Clegg and Blair out of the equation. Over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Well, it relates to what was going on Diego Garcia in the 1994-1997 period. From your sister's point of view, at that time, she was senior counsel for the detention and deportation program of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. She was the founder and sponsor of Conair, that is the United States Justice, collaborating directly or indirectly with Nicholas Soames, who at that time was defense minister under the UK government of John Major, who was a Standard Chartered employee prior to being the Prime Minister of the UK, and was responsible, this is Nicholas Soames, apparently for arranging with the Malaysian government the outsourcing of air traffic control training to Serco. So, to put it bluntly, when I see, and I won't go into the specifics, someone suggesting that Serco, there is hardly ever any evidence relating Serco to the hijacking of MH370 and everything points at Boeing, I would react to that and say, it looks to me like Boeing was a victim. My background as an engineer suggests to me that Boeing is a very competent and capable engineering manufacturer of aerospace assets, including military and civilian, and unfortunately is a little out of its depth when it comes to the use of those assets for C4ISR, which is command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which Boeing appears to have outsourced to Serco, the British company. Not very wise. So we have in the the 1994-1997 period, the transformation of Diego Garcia's efficient and effective signals intelligence facilities for the Five Eyes countries to a Con Air rendition, torture, and hacking base set up by your sister and the United Kingdom Defence Minister, Nicholas Soames. Now, this is pretty weird when you think about it, that you've got this woman who's never run a whelk stand, and the guy whose uncle, I believe that was Duncan Sands, was Minister for the Colonies in the 1960s, who arranged the lease of British Indian Ocean Territory to the United States military during the period when it would seem that JFK began to smell the extent of this conspiracy, and so they had to rub him out. Well, 1963, probably your sister would not have been involved. She was too young, although that's not obvious, is it? I mean, she was 17 and lots of young people were going into action in 1963 to war and not coming back. So her age is perhaps not so relevant, but I don't think she was in the loop even after or prior to her trip to Chicago. But Duncan Sands, the uncle of the Soames brothers, apparently told the Soames brothers, if you don't have the brains and you don't have the money, you must have your cock in the till. Cock is slang for a penis in English. I don't know if that is true of American. And the idea is that you need to marry a rich heiress, or for that matter, have an affair with someone of the same sex who's got some money. But the important thing is, it would appear the Soames brothers, the grandsons of Winston Churchill, were raised on the principle that lacking brains and lacking money, they should get their cocks in the collective till. And the question is, whose till was it? Well, I think one till that would be pay off in spades would be your sister's till at the United States Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund, which he's been running since 1984 with Eric Holder. And I believe she popped in $8 billion last year, which is going to pay for a lot of corruption in the FBI, etc. But I digress. Let's go back to Diego Garcia. So Diego Garcia is British Indian Ocean Territory. In the 1960s, it's handed off to the American military, but it remains British territory, and it remains any crimes committed on that property must be attributed to assets in the custody of the British government or certain sectors of the British government. So come the early 90s, after your sister had had her 1988 conversation with you about how to drone aircraft and take care of possible mutiny by prisoners in planes carrying people from Hawaii to the mainland, she evidently began the modification of the JPAT's fleet. And I believe there is one Boeing 737 in that fleet, or there was. Can you enlighten me on that, Phil?
Are you talking about the fleet at Con Air or the Marshal Service?
Yes.
They've had a lot of different airplanes over the years, and I don't know what year you were alluding to, but they've included things that I've flown like DC-9s, and there's something called a Convair 580. Watch how fast Taco Man puts a picture of a CV 580. Charlie Victor 580. Taco Man's really good at getting pictures. I'm sure he'll put it up. Let me get back to your question after I finish this. I was posting this, David. Check. It says, that reminds me, Plum party favors include taco racks, Obama card decks, tie-dye shirts, free beer tickets, looking around the room, Clyde Holt's book, koozies, t-shirts, pink shorts for some people, because I only have 10 sets of the Joe Arpaio pink shorts. And there's, oh yes, the cocktail glasses. We have these, there's things, David, I think even over in England they call, that's not it. Taco Man, that is a C-123. And that C-123, that's the one I believe they used in that movie Con Air with Nicolas Cage. I believe they might have crashed one too. And I know a little bit about airplanes, and I can tell you that the rudder, the rudder's missing, and the prop is missing, at least on the right engine. Um, on Air Justice One, my friend flies out of Boeing Field and told me about it. I actually have a photo of the MD-80. Yeah, they have a lot of different aircraft. They started with Convair 580s, DC-9s, 727s. They probably have a whole fleet because, see, my sister and Eric Holder have combined to have quite a party fund, but it's not going to do them any good because you can't spend money in prison, you can't spend money in hell. They will be going to both. That's my, it's not my judgment. I don't judge. That's my concern, that if Eric Holder and or my sister don't change their ways, confess what they've done, and seek a pardon, which probably would not be forthcoming, not with the abundance of cheap ropes. Um, but these people have conspired, Christine Marcy have conspired since 1984 to impose great suffering on innocent victims around the world, including the children, SOS Children's Villages in Africa, including the family members of the Malaysia 370 victims or non-victims. One way or the other, they are victims. If they're alive, they're illegally detained. If they're dead, they were murdered with discretion of forethought. Therefore, it's murder one. And some of the murders that have been done by agents working for Holder and Marcy include Chick Burlingame aboard American 77, Jason Dahl aboard United 93, and these people will be considered legally wrongful deaths because there's nothing left of them. All the humans were vaporized aboard the 9/11 jets, and the other two flight numbers are American 11 and United 175. These jets also have been taken down by the same consortium. I won't get them all because there's too many. There should be no more. But we'll see who wins this, the sister or the brother. Which reminds me, I'm going to go put on my Afro dude disguise because I have some blue sunglasses today. But first the flights, then I'll wrap up your question. 507, Adam Air 574, Air Africa 771, TWA 800, Turkish 1951, Colgan 3407, Air France. And notice I'm not saying anything about Bombardier or Warren Buffett and his huge stake in Bombardier. But the truth is that Bombardier has a aircraft called, I think it's called a CS 100, probably stands for chicken shit construction, because all that crap coming out of Canada is just lawn darts. But the Russian aircraft, on the other hand, was quite something. And I'm not saying that Warren Buffett was going to lose a ton of money. And I'm not mentioning Bombardier would be losing their place in the world airline market. Notice I didn't say that. I didn't say either that Bombardier nor Buffett would lose billions. Of course, I didn't say it, so if it sounds like I said it, somebody's screwing around with the technology again. Because I would never be so bold as to say Warren Buffett, the fat oracle of Omaha, if the Russian Sukhoi Superjet beat the CS, that's chicken shit, Canadian aircraft to the market. So on the count of three, would some male put up an image of the CS 100, if you can find one? If not, I will. And some female put up an image of a Serco Superjet. I said Serco. That's a Freudian slip. Sukhoi, Sukhoi. And if nobody else puts them up, I will. David, the answer to your question is my sister's funds are unlimited because the root source of my sister's funds are the City of London and that's the center of evil. That's somewhere between the City of London, Europe, banking, and the Vatican. David, over to you.
Because she's going after bona fide companies where perhaps one or more individual should be not taken out physically necessarily, but put in jail for corruption. But she goes behind the individual who's corrupt and goes after the shareholders' assets in that company and extorts payments from them that really boggle the mind. So I'm quite sure that the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation has corrupt elements within it. We know that to be true, and that's been true since 1865 when the operation out of London was run by David Cameron's great-great-grandfather, Sir Ewan. But the idea of the asset forfeiture, of course, is to extract protection money in order to protect a whole bunch of directors of these companies from going for jail under racketeering charges. So she's got a very nice little number. And of course, the technique is that if you don't pay up, your assets get vaporized or blown up, or your senior people get killed, or your asset basically crashes and kills a whole bunch of passengers who then sue you. So she's been working this racket for decades. But anyway, so the first paragraph of the post today, it's up in the chat room, plumcityabledanger.net, June the 3rd, 2014. United States Marine Field McConnell has linked the apparent use of Serco air traffic controllers in the stealth hijack of MH Flight 370 on March the 8th to his sister Christine Conair Mars's alleged rendition of Red Switch Network hackers to Diego Garcia. This is a quote in the context of Eric Snowden in Russia, where Diego Garcia is defined as a clandestine British base tapping undersea cables in the Middle East. Now, this is obviously above top secret, as described in the article, but what would that give you? If you have a British base nominally leased by the Americans tapping into the undersea cables that link Europe to, well, Malaysia, Indonesia, and China. Well, it gives the people doing the tapping inside information about the biggest transactions in international trade, and it gives them, as insiders, the opportunity to take an arbitrage position and get exceedingly wealthy at the expense of the victims. So now, why would your sister and Nicholas Soames want to get that inside position, and how could they sustain silence, which perhaps should be described as a terrified silence, when these crimes occur? Well, let's say you've got some of the characters sort of fictionalized in that film Con Air that are real characters out of the Christine Marcy prison system. Now remember, Christine Marcy is credited with launching a prison medical services program, where her center of activity, as I understand it, would have been in Washington to the east of the Potomac River at a place called St. Elizabeth's Hospital for the Insane. And St. Elizabeth's Hospital for the Insane was founded, I believe, in the 1850s. At its peak, it had 5,000 inmates and 9,000 staff. And during the Second World War, it was used for truth drug testing and psychological, well, what I would call psychological lobotomies. That is, if you could take an individual and, well, with some combination of surgery and drugs and psychological stress, you could turn these individuals into zombies, which have no feedback when they're watching their victim writhe in agony, let's say little John Benet Ramsey. They are totally obedient, and they can be deployed anywhere at any time, from a reservoir of the jail system into a crime scene and out again within 24 hours. So I don't know how many of these zombies your sister and Janet Reno and Jamie Gorelick created, but I would say at least 100,000 in the early 90s. And of course, this is a solution looking for a problem. The solution is that you know you can have a crime committed anywhere in the world, and the people committing the crime will die rather than reveal the underlying conspiracy, do exactly what they're told, either crimes of omission or crimes of commission, including the removal of evidence or the planting of evidence. The point is, when your sister starts moving these characters, she's got to be kind of discreet about it.
Excuse me.
Because if they're flying around the United States and landing and start misbehaving themselves, someone will notice. But of course, if you can create a reservoir for these characters in the areas of rendition, where not only they but their victims can be brought in from SOS children's villages around the world. And victims, there are two types here. There's the individual who's being tortured, and there's an individual who's been entrapped into witnessing the torture and doing nothing about it. So, of course, Diego Garcia is a perfect, because presumably you have high seniority, naval, military, army, air force, special ops people popping in, and somewhere on that building, in that island, possibly underground, you have the torture chambers where the children are brought to be tortured in the presence of senior British, American, Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand military officers or politicians. And the evidence abstracted from those encounters can be backhauled by satellite to a storage or archive facility for subsequent use in extortion. So that's why I believe Nicholas Soames, the defense minister, and Christine Marcy, then senior counsel for the detention and deportation program of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, began cooperating on a covert base, Conair base, for rendition, torture, and hacking into the Red Switch network of the Five Eyes countries. So this is an extraordinary facility. As far as I can see, if you then, and I think this happened around 1998, when your sister left her job as senior counsel for the detention and deportation program and started work as the chief operating officer of the Small Business Administration, which has a guaranteed loan portfolio of $70 billion. Again, quite a lot of cash for a woman who's never run a work stand. But what, of course, she can do now is take a mentor company like AT&T, where incidentally Michelle Obama, that was one of her clients in the group of Sidley Austin lawyers who went to Washington in 1991. AT&T, or its subsidiary Southwestern Bell Company, installed the cable, the undersea cable, or operates the undersea cable between Diego Garcia and Malaysia and Indonesia and presumably China. And the law firm that represents AT&T since the 19th century is Sidley Austin. So we've got this brilliant opportunity for the Red Switch network hackers to run surveillance, undersea surveillance by tapping into the cables, and monitor all of the communications between sovereign state military forces and governments around the world, and set up what are known as man-in-the-middle attacks. How am I doing so far, Phil? Over to you.
You're doing really well. And didn't you just say something about undersea cables going near or through Diego Garcia?
Correct.
Okay, let's check your memory. Who had tapped into an under-Atlantic Ocean fiber optic cable in late August or early September of 2001? Do you recall?
No.
A Navy submarine. Watch how good our chat room is. And I don't even know who's here today. Let me just see. There's two people who I think will be on this quickly if they're here. One of them starts with, Okay, one of the persons I'm thinking of is not here, and the other one is here. On the count of three, anybody know the name of the U.S. Nuclear submarine that went to the bottom of the Atlantic and tapped into a fiber optic? And they heard a conversation regarding the upcoming attack of 9/11. And I don't know who the people at either end of the fiber optic cable might have been, but I wouldn't rule out my sister or one of her cronies, and I wouldn't rule out Serco or some City of London bankers such as Standard Charters that said, who are the blanking Americans to tell us who to do business with? Well, I don't think I'm representing the blanking Americans very well, dressed the way I am. So let me just remove my disguise and then say, some of the blanking Americans look like this, and some of the people that look like this are not afraid to say things such as Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, somehow morphed into the person who claims to be Barack H. Obama. There is no such person. Uh, and the 2,000 plus U.S. servicemen who've lost their lives in Afghanistan since the 20th of January of 2009 have died under orders that were not legitimate because he's illegitimate in a lot more ways than one. But I think that the world needs to understand that Obama is a nowhere man. He claims to be from nowhere. He claims never to have done anything. I think that's a fair claim. I don't think anybody can produce a W-2 where he was earning money for doing something. Let me just go to the chat room and I'm going to pick 5 people that I recognize that are doing something or have done something. And I'll just show you what typical Americans, English, or Canadian folks are. Bent Wretch, not Wretch, that would be, of course, Queen Obama. Bent Wrench was a mechanic or a heavy equipment operator or both. Kanema was an airline pilot and a teacher. I don't know, okay, down to David Hawkins. You worked in the oil industry and also with artificial intelligence. Doreen is a grandmother and she's babysitting her grandson right now as we speak, I believe. And if you think I'm being confused by saying a grandmother is a job, well, it's a grand version of a mother. And the mother is the most important job, in my humble opinion, on earth. I have great respect for mothers, not just uh, mothers of my children, but my mother and the mother who raised everything. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world is a great song, and I'll go find it. Glenn Campbell corroborated with someone. It could have been Steve Wariner. We'll find out. Steve Wariner is a country music singer, probably from Missouri. Somebody can correct me on that. I need one more worker, and I'm going down till I find one. Do dee dum dee doo dee doo dee doo dee dum dee doo. Okay, Mensa Max used to work at IBM. There, we've all had jobs, but the guy with the red head on the chocolate face, that looks a lot like what I think you, yeah, of course, I just read it. Thanks, Phil. That image will be in chapter whatever's next. I don't even know what chapter went up last. I think it was chapter 6. So David, did you ask me a question? Because if you did, I want to answer it directly.
No, you asked me a question about did I know who intercepted an undersea cable and heard a conversation relating to 911.
Oh yeah, okay, well let's put that out again. For the chat, submarine intercepted the transatlantic chatter just before 9/11, and that chatter apparently is what caused the fourth target to become the Pentagon. The couple of people that we could ask, I don't think they'd answer. Rumsfeld would know, Cheney would know, well, Christine Marcy would know, but whoever monitored the transatlantic fiber optic communications that resulted in the Pentagon getting hit. Also responsible for the wrongful death of Gerald DeConto, Annapolis 79, and Chick Burlingame. Annapolis 71, and most of you out there probably saw my brief comments in Canton, Texas on Memorial Day, where I alluded to the fact that Chick Burlingame, my college classmate, had flown F-4 Phantoms just like me, and that, you know, God has been kind to me because I'm still alive. I got a lot of dead friends. There's a lot of faithful Americans as well as faithful Brits, Canadians, Russians, faithful to their nation, and it's resulted in their untimely departure from Earth. It's my hope for those people that they ended up in heaven, and that's a choice for all of us. And so far as I know, Eric Holder, Barack Obama, and my sister haven't made the proper choice. David, over to you.
Yeah, that's right, Phil. That struck a bell in my head. The idea that in order to maintain the silence of otherwise honorable people, they have to be terrified. And one way of terrifying them that I think is germane to this conspiracy is to say to them, whether it's the President of the United States or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, prior to a criminal event, we are going to run an exercise in which the Twin Towers, through a simulation, are brought down, and there's an attack on the Pentagon, and we destroy the Capitol building. And without background explanation, if that is put in front of regular people, that is, who've actually done a job, including George Bush, who's flown aircraft, A model aircraft that I think you told me are prototype or semi-prototypical and therefore significantly more dangerous to fly. But that is to say, a competent individual, loyal American is told, well, we're going to have an exercise. We're going to simulate the destruction of the World Trade Center, the Capitol building, and the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center. And if we decide we're going to switch from a simulation to the real thing, and you won't be able to stop us. And then subsequently, when you send in your law enforcement people, they're going to come away from the crime scene with evidence that proves we were behind it. It might be the thumbprint or the DNA on little John Bonet's body that can be related back to a database in Canada, such as the Wandering Persons database or the Foreign Fugitive database, where perhaps the pilot for the VIP fleet in Canada, Russell Williams, is determined to be the owner of the DNA and is now in jail. But the point is, for the victims or the extorted or threatened victims, it must be truly scary not to really understand who's making the threat. But then subsequently, when you deploy your FBI or CIA or National Security Agency, they come back to you and say, yeah, these guys actually pulled it off. And you're now faced, as President of the United States, with a dimly understood organization that is able to take out key assets. And again, I shake my head, but most Americans do not seem to understand the strategic implications. Well, for that matter, no one else in the world appears to understand, or very few, the strategic implications of the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center being vaporized by a British company at 9:37:19 on the morning of September the 11th, 2001. Because what that meant was whoever did that must have had a parallel facility able to take over the functions delivered or services provided by the US Navy Command Center in real time. And there is only one organization that could do that. And it's the organization that squats on Diego Garcia, which is the world's most powerful signals intelligence facility, doubling up, thanks to your sister, as a Con Air rendition, torture, and hacking center, where they're hacking undersea cables. Therefore, they can get in behind the signals associated with the red switch network, including the flash override signals that ostensibly come from the President of the United States and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, both of whom are hyphenated Americans. One self-described, because Martin Dempsey describes himself as an Irish American, unbeknown how much loyalty he owes to the Irish, and whether it's the Republic, Catholics, or the Protestants, doesn't really matter. It's certainly not the United States of America. And this clown at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, whose father is Kenyan, or was, making him a citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies, who was running a child porn blackmail racket with his mother in the Lahore Hilton in 1981. So America is not being well served by these characters. So, second paragraph of today's post. McConnell claims that his sister set up a Con Air, that's US Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System, close brackets, rendition, torture, and hacking facility on Diego Garcia in 1994 in a covert and illegal arrangement with Churchill grandson and former UK Minister of Defence from 1994 to 1997, Nicholas Soames, whose brother Rupert Soames now runs Serco, hence the title of the book, if I remember it correctly, Churchill's Red Switch Grandsons and the Crossed Keys contract hit. Now, there was a cable laid around the time of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which connected it would appear, the Electric Telegraph Company in the United Kingdom, which was launched in 1846 and bought the patents of a man called Wheatstone and a man called Cook. And it was Wheatstone who invented the cipher that became known as the Playfair cipher. Either way, it would appear that the Electric Telegraph Company was hardwired in its connection to the predecessor companies of AT&T by 1866, the year after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And our allegation, I think, Field, should be that the Electric Telegraph Company, which through various acquisitions and diversifications became Serco, is in a joint venture with AT&T right up to the present time, where AT&T, through some name changing, operates the undersea cable system that goes through Diego Garcia. And AT&T's legal representatives are Sidley Austin. So the net is closing in on these vermin in a very satisfactory way. And the beauty of it is, in spite of what we were told about going after Boeing and not Serco, they have no recourse, because I don't think the vermin are going to crawl out of the woodwork and sue either you or me. What do you think, Phil? Over to you.
Well, what I think is what I'm going to put right here, and then I'll answer your question about the vermin suing us. Apparently, there's some people in the chat room that think that the picture on today's show was Mensa Max and some young woman. If I'm reading this correctly, the picture they're talking about is me and some young woman. And the truth, if that's the picture they're talking about, the young woman was celebrating her 24th birthday. She was a flight attendant for Air Astana, and she and I were walking back from the Adequay Marina Pool to the Adequay Marina Hotel when some rich, I spelt it wrong, I spelt Reach. Reach would have been the call sign of the jets that were flying in and out of Diego Garcia. Reach is the call sign of what used to be called the Military Air Transport System. Then it was called MAC, Military Air something or other. But nowadays it's probably called some third name. They keep changing the names. David, you're talking about Serco and somebody else, Boeing, suing us. Well, Boeing is never going to sue me, because I am the greatest potential witness for Boeing in the world. And that's where I have a difference of opinion with a certain attorney who shall remain nameless. I don't think Boeing's the low-hanging fruit. I think the Airline Pilots Association is. It's the Airline Pilots Association, and I can't name all of them, but I can name the 4 presidents those being Prater, Babbitt, Worth, and Moak. Those four Alpha presidents know everything I know because I've sent it to them. Other people at Alpha who know what I know include attorneys Suzanne Kalfas, Rob Plunkett, James Johnson, and I don't know if it's an attorney or a girl Friday, but Pete John Hoonan. These people all know what I know. And one thing that those four attorneys and the four Alpha presidents know that I also know is the name of the judge who's going to be highly miffed when Boeing or Malaysia asked the Airline Pilots Association why they hoodwinked Judge Rosemary M. Collier into dismissing my case, because had Judge Rosemary M. Collier been treated honestly by the ALPA representatives, she would have ruled in favor of me, and she's going to be ruling in favor of me at some point in the future, I feel certain. And I could be making the first legal move. I prefer not to. Remember the other show the other day when I said you're approaching each other, maybe with up to 3,000 miles an hour of closure, and you both do nothing, hoping the other guy will make the first move, because no matter what move he makes, if he moves first, he's dead. Uh, that's why I'm holding off. I sent a 30-day letter to ALPA someday in March of this year. I said within 30 days I'll be filing a lawsuit regarding Malaysia 370 and civil case 1:08-1600 parentheses RMC, Rosemary M. Collier. Now, it's their obligation. If I don't file a lawsuit within 30 days of my notice of intent to file a lawsuit, they can sue me. Okay, here we go for the third time. Remember, whoever moves first loses. I wish they would sue me. Save a lot of paperwork on my part. But the thing I would rather have happen than to have ALPA try to sue me so I could respond and have their ass, you heard me correctly, is I'd like to see Malaysia file a suit on anyone. I don't care who they file a suit on. The minute Malaysia files a suit on something, whether it's Boeing, ALPA, it doesn't matter, then I would join. One thing that's holding me off or holding me back from filing a lawsuit presently is there is another pilot whistleblower lawsuit that's just in the final processes. And once that lawsuit is settled and a piece of history, I will be visiting with the legal team that worked with the other whistleblower. And just so nobody thinks they're getting highlighted, the whistleblower that has the settlement occurring as we speak or within the previous 90 days or the next 90 days is not Wayno Ritter, it's not Dan Hanley, it's not Newton Dixon, it's not John Stepetovich, and it's not me, it's someone else. And the whistleblowers are probably going to be doing better in the next 120 days than they've done in the last 10 years. I say that only because, and this is an admission of ignorance, but can anybody out there mention another case where the Supreme Court justices agreed unanimously on anything during the Obama administration? Because last week they agreed unanimously to tell Obama to pack sand. David, over to you.
Yeah, that's right, Field. And so, the third paragraph of today's post. McConnell also claims that Soames ordered Serco to start training Malaysian air traffic controllers in 1996, while Marcy arranged US Small Business Administration loans needed by Serco protege companies to fund a global air traffic control service over FAA contract towers, E4Bs, and the Diego Garcia undersea cables in preparation for the hack of the Red Switch network and the stealth hijacks of 911. So everything is dropping into place because what the Marcy team of senior executive service bureaucrats decided is they had to have a facility to maintain control over the United States government, even in the event of the president and the vice president and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Speaker of the House being killed or discombobulated or being cut out of the decision-making loop. Remember, in every government, it's the bureaucrats that control the government, and the politicians dance and strut upon the stage, and eventually another election comes round and they have their exits and they have their entrances, and I suppose Bambi is about to face his exit quite soon. But the bureaucrats stay on. The National Academy of Public Administration, that was delegated the responsibility of, and they've written a paper about it, FBI transformation. Well, I wonder if most Americans know what the FBI was back then and what it is now, and who were the principles behind that transformation. Well, one was Field's sister, Christine Marcy. The other was Maureen Baginski. And what was done to the FBI was to take its laboratory that analyzes evidence taken from the crime scene and taint it. That is to say, to corrupt the FBI so they wouldn't find evidence that would point to the real perpetrators behind a crime, and they would find evidence that would position them and the public to go after the patsies. But above all, I believe what the FBI became is the go-to people for the President of the United States to say, okay, on your bikes and go off to Benghazi and tell us what happened to Christopher Stevens. Now, when the FBI went off to Benghazi, they were not allowed into the crime scene. So presumably someone in the crime scene carried out some bits of evidence and gave it to the FBI. What apparently was not given to the FBI was the fact that Christopher Stevens was tortured and sodomized. What was not given to the FBI was that the Red Switch network had been compromised, so real-time backhauled to the White House so that Barry Spatero, in the arms of his bodyguard lover, Reggie Love, could watch in real time the torture and rape of the United States ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens. Pretty staggering at how sick this beast has become. But that's what you get when you have a backdoor access into the Red Switch network. Remember, the Red Switch network is operated by Serco for and on behalf of the National Command Authority of the United States, which has two key players who theoretically should be given on-demand access to the flash override facility. One of those today would be Martin Dempsey, the Irish-American chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the other would be Barack Obama, the Anglo-American President of the United States of America. Now, to the best of my knowledge, neither of those people are particularly sophisticated in terms of encryption or decryption. And the staggering thing is, in order to get into the Red Switch network and exploit or profit or benefit from their flash override privileges, they have to pick up a phone and ask a technician at the other end. That technician being paid and controlled by the British company Serco. So I often delight, well, when I choose to think about this absolute garbage. What happens when Barry Spatero picks up the phone and says, I want to be patched in to my Red Switch network so I can send some flash override instructions to my folks in Benghazi to either stand up or stand down. And the Serco technician says, F off. What does little Barry do? Well, I guess he continues to curl up in the arms of Reggie Love. But I bet you the transmission of the signal from Benghazi in real time didn't get interrupted in the same way we keep getting interrupted with our Skype program. Field, over to you.
Yeah, did you say something about our Skype program being interrupted?
Well, from time to time, it is not the Skype, the live stream, right? But
Ah,
I think this is just a faute de manœuvre, as they say.
okay. I'm almost going to whistle a song. I'd sing it, but there's no words to it. But I think I can whistle it good enough where if any of you can think back to the summer of 1968, this song was probably, it probably would have been judged the greatest instrumental of 1968 had it not been for that blue, blue, my love is blue, blue is my heart since I'm without you. This one was lilting, more upbeat, and it also came out of Europe. Paul Moriat did Love is Blue. Anybody recognize this song? I'll play it at the end. He goes, anyway, someone from Europe might recognize that song. It was a Frenchman who did it. It's a great song. In French, the name is Ame Celine, Amiceline. In English, it's a different song, and towards the end of this show, I'll play it. The reason I'll play it at the end is because that way, if we upload it to YouTube, we can leave the song off and avoid copyright infringement. Pat S. says, from the bakery across from Abel Danger Global Headquarters. Yes, that bakery is named Bittersweet Bakery and More. And just to show you that I frequently go into Bittersweet Bakery and More, yum, yum. I had one of those right before the show. That's probably why I have too much energy. Oh, look at this. Fudgy. Proves we're live, even if we are unprofessional. So, David, I got a song to play at the end. And following up on Pat's question, the baker lady across the street is Gwen, and she's going to be making us a sheet cake for that'll be sufficient for 30 to 50, but it won't be plum. And I bet you at least 5 people know uh, where the purple color is coming from. We had the birthday cake last year, and the 2 birthday boys in our group last year, Peterson, one of them's birthday is July 20th. That's Bucky Badger. And Craig's is earlier. One of them this year will turn 48, one of them will turn 49. It's funny, last year one of them turned 47 and 48. They're always a year apart. I can't figure that out because I don't have an honors degree from some school in England about mathematics. So, David, you want to say something intelligent while I point out that we have resolved what helicopter tapped the fiber optic cable? It was the USS Parche, Parche. How do we know that? Because there's only 2 U.S. submarines that are tasked with that specific duty. The USS Parche, which was retired, I think, in 2005, and the USS Jimmy Carter, which was not commissioned until. Interesting about the USS Jimmy Carter. It's 100 feet longer than its 2 sister ships, and the cylinder, the 100-foot cylinder that was added to allow them to sneak up on somebody and let a SEAL team out. And that's great that we have those abilities. Unfortunately, civilian contractors, and notice I didn't say anything about Christine Marcy or Barack Obama, but contractors for the British Invisibles and the Senior Executive Service have the ability to kill SEALs. Now, that isn't going to work very well going forward because we're going to be slapping a team that was wiped out en masse, ENMASSE. 15 of them were killed with the detonation of some explosives that were carried on to Extortion 17 by the 7 late arriving Afghani nationals who were not on the manifest, which brings us around to Malaysia Flight 17, excuse me, I was on Flight 17. Malaysia Flight 370, my beeper's going off, because there was an explosive carried, it didn't get detonated on Malaysia 370, but there was something that was explosive and contraband, and that's why we haven't seen the first page of the cargo manifest yet. But when we see it, we'll know what the explosives on there. We will know if there were any military weapons that the U.S. wanted to maintain custody of. And all this information is going to be forthcoming, but not to sound boastful or arrogant, but I think we have the perpetrators of 370 over the barrel because they can't back up and they can't go forward. And that means they're a lot like a sheep caught in a barbed wire fence. It's usually got its front two legs on the ground, and it's usually suspended with its rear two legs above the ground where it can't get any traction, so it can't go backwards and it can't go forward. And so we have basically put the perpetrator's sheep on a barbed wire fence, and they don't know whether to poop or go blind. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And when you mentioned the submarine interception or the tapping of the undersea cable, so of course I always, while you were talking, Google Serco and submarine, and here's this little gem. Serco Inc. extends Navy services with $56 million submarine C4I contract. C4I is command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence contract. And under this contract, Serco will provide systems development, systems and software engineering, test evaluation and systems integration, fleet engineering support, logistics, training, and technical publications for SSC, that's Systems Center San Diego, that's SSC San Diego. Submarine Command Control, Communications, Computers, and Intelligence and Engineering Support Division. And amazingly, Serco has supported SSC San Diego and its predecessor organizations since 1990, meaning to all intents and purposes, the United States submarine fleet command and control is operated by the British company Serco, which is under investigation for the fraudulent tagging of prisoners who either didn't exist or are dead or who are back in jail or who are overseas, presumably squatting on Diego Garcia, ready to support the next hack of the Red Switch network and false flag attack. So it's with great pleasure that I make my contribution to the net that closes in on this company, because there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that it is a racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organization that binds victims and perpetrators together in a child porn blackmail racket, where otherwise courageous individuals are intimidated into silence because they fear either an attack on their family, as was the case with John Bennett Ramsey, and the crime scene investigation is compromised through the tainted lab of the FBI, courtesy of Christine Marcy and Maureen Baginski. And I don't see, and I sympathize for the people in that command chain, how much more terrified you can be than to know or be warned that an attack will take place. Let's say MH370 will suffer a stealth hijack. You could probably be told, let's say you're at 1600 Pencil Avenue and you're a legitimate president of the United States as opposed to this clown who's there at the moment. So you're told there will be an attack on the 8th of March on a sovereign state airline, Malaysian Airlines, flying a Boeing 777-200, and it will disappear. And you won't be able to do anything about it. And then there will be a search party sent out over an area, well, an arc 10,000 kilometers long. I think the current search field, underlined field, is 200,000 square miles. And at the end of 90 days, and this is an imaginary conversation between SES bureaucrats and the President of the United States, nothing will have been found. and you're the President of the United States, you're Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, and you both have privileged access to the red switch network that allows you to communicate with anyone in your military command using the flash override signal, and no one that you communicate with will tell you what happened to the aircraft. Now, we could make a recommendation, Phil, that little Barry and Martin Dempsey call up Abel Danger to find out, but I doubt if they will. However, we're closer to what happened to MH370, and I'm guessing this is what happened. On Diego Garcia, there is a team of people engaged in rendition, torture, and hacking under the label Con Air that effectively has the backdoor into the red switch network. And instructions came either through or via your sister and Nicholas Soames that it was necessary to impress upon the Malaysian government that they could do nothing to prevent this hijack. A lot of Malaysian citizens will be killed, and the search will extend through 90 days into the southern Indian Ocean, and nothing will be found. And I presume that people in Malaysia would say that's ridiculous. It couldn't possibly happen. Well, 90 days later, the search program has extended into the southern Indian Ocean. It's looked over a search field of 200,000 square miles, and there's nothing there. However, someone will have photographs or videos of where that plane is. And my guess is they will be videos of MH Flight 370 Boeing 777-200 inside a hangar on Diego Garcia, where there will be a community of torturers and rendition experts and hackers who intend to maintain that secret, if that's will, as long as necessary before exposing it in a way that discredits someone who doesn't want to be discredited, whether it's the president of Communist China or the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Either way, the beauty of having a man in the middle position on the red switch network, you can bring about a crime scene, or you can structure a crime scene so the crime doesn't get solved, and then at a time of your choosing, because you know that all the witnesses are terrified into silence, you can point, for example, by taking bits of that plane and dropping it, I don't know, in Afghanistan, or putting it in that cave where Osama bin Laden was straddling his yak. So the owners or custodians of the red switch network are exceedingly powerful. Over to you, Phil.
Speaking of powerful, there's a funeral on Friday morning at 11 o'clock in Menominee for this pilot from Northwest Delta Airlines that also flew F-16s at the guard unit with me, Bill Cowden. And it may occur that I end up going to that funeral. Here's why. Yeah, most of his life he spent in Fargo, and then his wife, who's a doctor of whatever you call an eye doctor. She's an MD that does eyes, which reminds me of a song from the Guess Who, These Eyes, da 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 da, cry every night for you, these eyes. Anyway, that's a great song, which reminds me, flash major announcement. We will have some lawn chairs and a boom box, which we will play not really loud, but we'll play a bunch of songs from the 60s at the Plum City Plunge. I just got an email from Agent 99. She and her husband, Cherokee Nose, can't be attending this year, but I bet you they will next year when they find out what a good time they missed this year. And group of things. For instance, in this box, there's a lot of stuff we'll be giving away. And there's more boxes coming. There's teal or turquoise, I'm not sure what the color is, gift bags. Each one will have a bumper sticker that says Plum Plunge 2014. Of course, we'll be traveling in our undercover cars, many without license plates, and it's just really encouraging to most of us. In fact, probably all of us are very encouraged that We've got people coming from a great distance, two ladies coming from Florida, one lady coming from California, and then of course the SEALs parents, Karen and Billy Vaughn, they're coming from Stuart, Stuart, Florida. So we expect to have around 20 or 22 Able Danger people gathered, and it'll be fun to see if we do achieve those numbers this year, what we're going to do next year. We do have dinner reservations at 5 p.m., so mark your calendars. It's 5 p.m., not 7 p.m. for 40 people at Vino in the Valley, but we can accommodate a lot more if they show at 5 p.m., which means if we had more than 40, we would just be the first people in line. And when we got there, we'd say, we're here for a table of 40, and the 10 or 12 stragglers behind us would like to be seated near us. And that's going to be a nice gathering. And between Pat S., which is Freeport Girl, and myself, we'll come up with some phony baloney name tags. They're probably those kind that are about, well, they're a little bit smaller than this, and they're white usually. They could be any color on this side, and then they're sticky on that side, so you can stick them right on your shirt. Or you might want to stick them somewhere else, like your shoulder, if you don't want somebody staring at your shirt. I know that some of us guys don't like having to stare in certain directions to read a name tag because it can be misinterpreted. But anyway, we're going to have a real relaxing and encouraging event. And David, before I went off on that tear, you were talking about something. And did you ask me a question? I hope you didn't, because if you did, I didn't catch it. Over to you.
No, I'm just trying to describe how this facility in Diego Garcia operates as a man in the middle position on the presidential chain of command, such that a crime can be staged with these Con Air rendition, torture, and hacking characters by Serco, and where the guilty are sheltered and the innocent are framed. So I've just put up in the chat room a little bit of a date stamp, so to speak, for the facility at Diego Garcia, where France Telecom Marine subsidiary Chamarral Marine Services has been responsible for systems maintenance, that's the undersea cable, since June 2001 for the segment between the latitude of Dakar in the Atlantic Ocean and Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. This service zone covers 20,000 kilometers, or 70% of the total cable length. But if I interpret that correctly, is by June 2001, your sister and Nicholas Soames, through fraudulent conversion of funds and laundering by the Small Business Administration and their counterparts in the UK, had equipped Diego Garcia for the man in the middle attack of 911. And we have to remember, of course, that June 1st and June 2nd, 2001 was the dates of the Amalgam Virgo war game, which simulated a live fly exercise involving the hijacking of a Boeing 737, I believe, over Alaska, flying south, mustering over Abbotsford Airport, presumably mustered by the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators and ALPA. And of course, the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators changed its name to the Honorable Company of Air Pilots, and the navigators somehow managed to disappear. That particular plane in the simulation headed south and then turned east and was earmarked for the Capitol building. On the front page of that briefing document, as we know, was that long-bearded, yak-straddling wonder who was on a dialysis machine in a cave in Afghanistan, who was about to bring down the United States government, or try to. But that means, since it was a public document distributed amongst the participants in the war game exercise, which was Canada and the United States, everyone in the Bush administration would have known that as far as the exercise was concerned, the target was the Capitol building. Now, through the back door, what happens if George Bush and his then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Henry Shelton, who actually launched the Able Danger military intelligence project, ABLE Danger, before Deutsch & Co. had the disk smashed and bathed in acid at Garland in Texas. Presumably, Bush and the chairman of his Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Henry Shelton, would have dismissed that attack as outrageous, simplistic, and infeasible. So why rehearse it? But the people organizing the attack by then had the undersea cable in Diego Garcia tapped, and they were listening into communications on the Red Switch network. Now, the Red Switch network, of course, has to cater for George Bush, or had to cater for George Bush and General Henry Shelton while they were in their official capacity in the Pentagon and the White House. But of course, when they're traveling, you have to set up, and that's what Christine Masters' bureaucrats would be doing, the Red Switch network so that they can communicate from their hotel rooms. And the hotels that have been modified to support the Red Switch network by Serco are the hotels in the Starwood chain, which includes Sheraton, Westin, and W hotels. And the Sheraton Hotel of great interest, or the Sheraton hotels of great interest on 911, was the Sheraton Pentagon City Hotel overlooking the crime scene, whose cameras on the roof would have been seen or watching the mobilization of the triage teams before the crime was committed. And the voyeur with the bent dick in Port Douglas, Queensland, by the name of Bill Clinton, who was in the Sheraton Port Douglas Hotel on the 12th of September 2001, Australian time. So here's the bait and switch. If the defending blue team in the United States of America and the Pentagon and its environs were using GPS, all the Red Switch network people would need to do is to link up through the undersea cables to a safe transmission base, then into the E-4B aircraft, which had been modified by Christine Marcy under the Small Business Administration mentor-protege programs to carry cesium clocks that could switch the attack team from GPS, which could be monitored by the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center, over to GLONASS. And the fascinating thing about GLONASS timed and controlled assets, they would be invisible to GPS timed command control communications computers and intelligence networks, which is why Washington and the Pentagon and Dick Cheney and George Bush went blind, deaf, and dumb on 911, because they were communicating with GPS time when the attack was switched over by Christine Marcy and Nicholas Soames to GLONASS, where the tracking and telemetry system for GLONASS is run out of St. Petersburg, which gave the time on the beside the date stamp of the images taken from outside the Pentagon of the explosion of 1737-19, i.e. 8 hours later than the actual explosion. And because these guys are not members of the A-team, there is one frame where you can see the aluminum oxide white smoke of the missile that hit the Pentagon, presumably dropped from an A-3 Skywarrior. And that missile, or the solid propellant of that missile, would carry the signature of the Defense Ammunition Center. It was actually built by ATK, and the incendiaries or the solid propellant inside that missile would be the same as the solid propellant in the elevator shafts of the Twin Towers, and would carry a signature, a trace element signature, that would allow the perpetrators of the attack to say to George Bush, well, we said we were going to do it. Your FBI experts in explosives and ATF have gone to the crime scene, and they've come back and they've found out that the trace elements, which effectively gives a chemical signature, trace back the source of the explosives and incendiaries to the Defense Ammunition Center operated by Serco. I rest my case. Over to you, Phil.
I see something that's not resting. In fact, here, let me just show you. Taco Man just, well, that's funny, actually, but I'll keep it to myself. Yeah.
Presumably dropped from an A3 Skywarrior. And that missile, or the solid propellant of that missile, would carry the signature of the Defense Ammunition Center. It was actually built by ATK, and the incendiaries or the solid propellant inside that missile would be the same as the solid propellant in the elevator shafts of the Twin Towers, and would carry a signature, a trace element signature, that would allow the perpetrators of the attack to say to George Bush, well, we said we were going to do it.